going to be 4 documents posted tomorrow. One will be the specifications revised, checklists and revised performance and prescriptive path. There will be an executive summary of the changes, which may be your most important document. I'll summarize a lot of what I'm talking about today. There'll be a revised cost savings analysis, and most importantly, there'll be an extensive response document from EPA with the detailed responses to the comments we received, about 300 sets of comments or individual comments, all in the matrix with the research findings we came up with and our final policy decisions. There's also a detailed response to the ResNet comments, since that represented a broad-based submission to us from a group of leading stakeholders. So let me proceed. And Jack, I'm trying to advance the slide, so there we go. Okay, so the first slide, I'm just going to start off with some review slides. Again, we're here because this program really truly has grown impressively, and I think we have a lot of folks we work with. You can see by this growth chart here that we're tracking the industry slowdown, but if you look at the total number of homes, we're at 1 million plus labeled homes today. So this program has grown, and while numbers do track down with the industry, we go to the next slide and look at the market penetration. Again, that is very strong, and the interest in the program continues to grow. Last year, 2008, we did 17% market penetration compared to 12% the year before. 2009, we're forecasting 20% or so market penetration. So again, very significant growth, and we're looking at a 1 in 5 homes constructed in 2009 earning the Energy Star. What I also like to do when I start is to talk about how Energy Star does compare with green programs, just so it gives some context. We're very much similar in that we both are voluntary with green programs, and we really focus on a label that recognizes builders for achieving excellence. What's very different about Energy Star and green programs is the approach we take to our program threshold requirements. We basically develop very rigorous specifications that are clearly defining energy efficient in a very non-negotiable way. A lot of specifications that are required, not a lot of choices. But we think in the marketplace that is really an important solution we provide, that the consistent delivery of features in Energy Star are important to the. I'm sorry, I had to reduce the volume on my computer so I wasn't having an echo. The specifications ensure a consistent delivery of a package of improvements that consumers can count on, whereas the green programs offer a lot more flexibility. The green programs are point rating systems with multiple tiers, and so you get more variation what you get from home to home. But this is a very different approach, but it explains why these specifications are so important to us. The specifications are the ultimate way to define energy efficient for the Energy Star program. And if we look at basically the constructed green programs, I always like to show it as a simplified format where you have energy efficient performance, indoor air, and resource efficiency as the cornerstones for green. And EPA labels are a great ingredient way to define internal attributes to green programs. Energy Star for efficiency, Indoor Air Plus for indoor environments, and Water Sense for the water resource portion of resource efficiency. And what's interesting is there are a lot more internal labels that resource efficiency can use to further define other attributes. So moving along, let's talk about what's the same with these new specifications. And essentially, what doesn't change is the broad mission we have with Energy Star qualified homes to grow into a comprehensive building science program. And we are growing up with these new specifications in a very significant way. But the cornerstone of building science is that you can't deliver a building that works unless you do 3 things: control airflow, thermal flow, moisture flow. Moisture flow is 2 components: vapor flow and bulk moisture. And then after that, you're always looking to be more efficient with your loads, and have a QA/QC component. Now, within that construct and that ambition of what we wanted to do with the program, the first specs came out in 1996. They introduced 4 or 5 main components: the air sealing of the house more consistently from home to home, tight ducts, low-E windows, the efficient heating and cooling equipment appropriate to climate, and the verification process, which was in a very, very nascent existence when we came along. And then in 2006, we introduced our second generation specification change, mostly focused around this new thermal bypass checklist, and we contributed to that with the air barriers and insulation alignment. Additionally, we had right sizing as a requirement, and the prescriptive package at least started to introduce more requirements for water heating, lighting, appliances. And that's where we are today. And again, for review, the third specification's out. And with the third specification, essentially we're adding what we think are the necessary pieces to complete the building science picture. Again, I think Energy Star grows up with this specification. It becomes what it always wanted to be as a program. And the way we've completed the building science is by adding insulation installation and minimum thermal bridging to wrap up the thermal flow control, adding pressure balancing to enhance both airflow control and, in fact, even some moisture vapor control because of driving forces in rooms where the doors are shut. And then also for vapor control, ventilation, dehumidification in hot, humid climates, bulk moisture with a comprehensive water managed construction set of requirements, and then enhancing the HVAC heating and cooling efficient equipment requirements by also making sure that the whole systems are installed properly. So this is where we were with the original proposal, and this is where we're staying. Now, what I'd like to talk to about with these specification changes when we grow up is that what we're starting to deliver, rather than pieces of a system, or complete systems. And much like when you buy a car, what's so important to you that you have complete systems, electrical systems, powertrain systems, engine systems, braking systems. It's the same thing with Energy Star. I think what we're trying to do is ensure that we have complete systems. And the 3 cornerstones to the systems that we're focused on are the thermal enclosure system, the HVAC system with quality installation, and the water managed construction system. And so what we're doing now is having 3 key checklists that deliver these systems with the specifications. So let's look how this works. Again, there are mandatory measures vis-a-vis the checklists, and what's also the same is the prescriptive and performance path options. The prescriptive path option will stay the same, where the reference design, which is essentially the current building option package approach to providing a set of requirements prescriptively for Energy Star, will be available, and they will be ramped up as per the original proposal. And then for performance path, again, going through this in a quick review, you take the reference design, you apply that to the house that you're rating in terms of floor area, volumes, orientation, and location. And you apply all the other reference design specifications for insulation R value, for window solar heat gain coefficient and U value, for air filtration, duct leakage, and so forth. You apply those reference design specifications to your house plan, volumes, location, orientation, and that yields a HERS index reference design score. Now, if your home is the same or smaller than the average size home that we call a benchmark home, you're done with your threshold. But if the home's bigger, then you have to do a size adjustment to get your final Energy Star HERS index target score. And again, if your house is the same or smaller than the benchmark score, simply rating the house with the reference design yields that target score. If it's bigger, there's a size adjustment that hasn't changed from the prior proposal. Thereafter, on performance, any other preferred rated measures you can apply to a second software run, and you just have to make sure that the result is the same or better HERS score than that Energy Star HERS index target score. Now, since this is a little complicated, we've provided on the website a new Energy Star 2001 HERS index target procedure, and that document will be posted tomorrow along with the other documents, and it's an attempt by us to make this a lot clearer. In addition, what it does, it shows the specific inputs that would be used, climate zone by climate zone, rather than have them kind of clumped together as they are in the National Reference Design Specification. So instead of saying IECC 2009 insulation, it would have the specific insulation values, climate zone by climate zone. And instead of an Energy Star window, it would have the actual solar heat gain coefficient and U value for windows, climate zone by climate zone. So that HERS index target procedure has extra guidance how this would work along, excuse me, along with tables specifying input values in a lot more specificity. Okay, so that's what stayed the same. We're basically the same prescriptive performance format. We're off the fixed HERS score with the simulated performance method, and we're still focusing on systems. So what's different? And here again, I'm going to ask for you for your forgiveness once I get past showing some graphic slides of the systems. We go through a lot of word slides. Okay, so first, like I said, there are three checklists. The first is the thermal enclosure checklist, and that addresses high performance windows, insulation R value, insulation installation, air barriers and alignment, thermal bridging, and air sealing. Now what's different is this used to be called, I believe, the thermal bypass checklist and the quality framing checklist, and these have been combined into just one new named checklist called the thermal enclosure system checklist. Also what's different is that quality framing now is called thermal bridging, because really what this is really addressing in terms of requirements is a number of options that can be used to minimize the thermal bridging through the framing, some of which could be advanced framing, some of which could be other measures such as rigid insulated sheathing. So this is now called thermal bridging, that section. In addition, we've added sections for high performance windows and insulation installation that require minimum IECC windows and minimum IECC 2009 R values. So in other words, when you do the performance path compliance, you can trade off insulation and windows, but not below these levels, because now these are specified on the checklist as a minimum requirement. We don't want any Energy Star qualified home to have less than the IECC 2009 window requirements and insulation requirements. So that is a new change, and there are new sections on this checklist to make sure those are checked off. There's a whole additional section also for air sealing. The thermal bypass checklist that we currently have really combines some air sealing measures with air barrier measures, and then there are a whole host of other air sealing requirements that we thought should be visually checked so that you could not test out of a home and leave in some more significant air leakage points. And the reason for this, again, is the house is getting so tight and so much better insulated. If you visually don't check for certain significant air leakage points, you could wind up having significant flow through small changes that would otherwise comply. All you had to do was meet an infiltration test value. And a good example of how significant an issue that can be goes back to the Juneau, Alaska homes that are built with SIPs. In those homes, I'm fairly confident with the SIP construction, they probably would have passed the air leakage requirement for Energy Star, but they had a significant leakage point just at the ridgeline. And that ridgeline leakage led to vapor flow through that gap that led to condensation along the entire ridge and almost complete destruction of the roof systems that had to be removed and replaced because of that one leakage point. So you can't test out of significant air leakage points. There are about, I think, a dozen or so of these items on the checklist, and those have to be visually checked. So important point there, and I'll mention that it also includes specialized items to be checked. For modular homes, you have to make sure there's a gasket and foam seal at the marriage joints. For SIPs, you have to make sure the panels at all joints connections are caulked and taped, and there are a whole host of traditional construction requirements as well. There are more builder options for them to check themselves because we don't want to increase the number of field visits, and there are changes to the advanced framing system I'll go through in a slide just ahead. Now on the next checklist, HVAC quality installation, it's now called HVAC system quality installation checklist, and again it addresses a full complement of efficient equipment requirements, right sizing, air distribution, airflow, sensible heat ratio, refrigerant charge, duct installation, pressure balancing, combustion venting, ventilation, filtration, similar things to what we had, What's different is now the checklist is fully aligned with ANSI and ACCA ACA protocols. We've added combustion venting requirements that ensure you have to have direct and power vented equipment in these homes because, again, they're so tight and so well insulated. We've added ventilation to this section because it belongs here. We've aligned the ventilation with ASHRAE 62.2. We added filtration because filtration is part of a complete HVAC system. And we completely eliminated the indoor air quality checklist, and that will help avoid any potential confusion with the Indoor Air Plus label, also put out by EPA. And the last checklist now would be the water managed system checklist. This is two components, a builder checklist and a rater checklist. The name change to water managed system checklist. The split into rater and builder is to address comments that came in where raters were concerned about access to check certain items that would require additional trips, and also concerned about having to get in positions that might be dangerous or create liability for them moving around the job site. So we pulled items into two separate checklists, removed the requirement for insulating pipe and exterior walls, and we added a disclaimer regarding moisture-related problems not being guaranteed to be mitigated just because of this checklist. So this is the third checklist. And from here on, we're going to go into some significant word slides. Again, like I said, this is for the hardcore Energy Star qualified home stakeholder who's really tracking what we're doing, really working with us as a business. And I'll go through these again fairly quickly so I can allow time for questions and meet my travel schedule. So the first is advanced framing requirements. I think this may have had the most significant number of comments of anything on the first round of the vetting process with that first proposed specification. And here's some of the highlights of what we've done to address comments coming in. First, raters do not direct builders to remove framing. We provide clarifications that their job is just to make sure that the information on the framing plans is consistent with what's going on in the field, and the framing plans are required, again, to use less framing. In addition, all platforms in the attic must be raised, not just the ones for the HVAC equipment, and they have to be raised to allow full depth insulation, so that's been clarified. Also, we made an accommodation with raised tilt trusses where we said that the insulation depth at the edge only needs to be to 75% depth of the full insulated thickness in the attic. And this was done just to accommodate some constraints with raised tilt trusses, and so this was changed as well. Also, there's a request for clarification about what we meant by reduced framing at windows. So we clarify that by a limit of one pair of king and jack studs at window if you use the advanced framing option for your thermal bridging reduction. And where you use rigid insulated sheathing as your option for addressing thermal bridging, in the wall cavity you can use grade 2 insulation, and that's the only exemption from grade 1 insulation with the Energy Star specifications. Where you have rigid insulated sheathing on the outside, in the wall cavity, grade 2 insulation would be allowed. And again, this is the only exemption. Sticking with the framing checklist, moving to the HVAC contractor checklist. Also a lot of comments on this one as well. And what we're addressing here, well, the first thing here is we want to make sure there's a disclaimer that we're not ensuring good indoor air quality just because there are ventilation requirements and we're addressing some moisture issues. So there is a disclaimer on this checklist saying that these are intended to help improve the HVAC system, and they're not guaranteeing a improved indoor air quality house. And so that's just a disclaimer that's on the checklist. Now also, rather than requiring a fixed sensible heat ratio of 0.7, what we've done instead is we require on the HVAC contractor checklist for the contractor or the engineer or designer sizing the system to compare the latent capacity of the equipment that's specified to the latent load. If the latent load's not met, then you have to install an Energy Star qualified dehumidifier. So rather than just have a arbitrary number like 0.7 SHR, there's this series of lines on the checklist where you list the, again, you list the latent capacity of the equipment, you list the latent load. If the load's greater than the equipment, then you know you have to have the dehumidification. So that was a change made there. Also, the person responsible for the design has to sign the document now as well as the contractor. So it's not the contractor, but a separate engineer or HVAC system designer who sizes the equipment and the ducts. That person as well must sign the checklist. Also, the systems that aren't AHRA rated may be used if manufacturer data documenting you have an acceptable combination is provided. And we're going to make this a policy change for the current specification until the new specification takes force as well. So that's a policy statement that will be issued in the very near term. And lastly, the MERV 8 requirement was reduced to align with ASHRAE 62.2, and it was reduced to MERV 6. Okay, moving on to the HVAC contractor checklist part 2. There's additional guidance provided around the TXV as was requested. Space heating and water heating equipment inside the home's pressure boundary must be direct vented or power vented. If it's space heating, it has to be actually direct vented. And since all the equipment is isolated from the home or power vented, the CO detector requirement was removed. Okay, moving on to the HVAC contractor, HVAC rater checklist. All the lines that were looking at the HVAC contractor checklist that were itemized on the rater checklist were combined into one line. So now all the raters responsible for is checking a line. Did the contractor checklist, did the contractor complete the checklist and submit it, yes or no? So the only requirement for HERS raters with overseeing the contractor checklist for HVAC is just to verify that it was complete and it was submitted. And if it was, it's one check-off box, and all the other boxes that were on the old checklist have been compressed to that one box. Also, there was clarification on the new checklist that all the duct installation oversight requirements for the rater doesn't just apply to the HVAC ducts. It applies to the ventilation ducts, the exhaust system ducts, and the pressure balancing ducts in the home. So when you're looking for kinks and for proper strapping, you're looking for no egregious bends and so forth, it's not just with the HVAC system ducts, but all the other duct systems as well. And then we clarified items that require measuring in the house by the HERS rater for their checklist. And it's the supply flow at the bedroom registers or equivalent pressure balancing tests have to be done. And that's so you can size the CFM, size the pressure balancing opening from the bedroom to the hallway. You need to know the supply flow at the bedroom, and then it's 1 square inch per 1 CFM of flow. Now, as an equivalent option, if you can get the design documents with the actual sizing CFM per bedroom, you wouldn't need to do this test. You would simply have the CFM sized by the engineer and designer for that house, for the bedroom, and make sure that if the room, for instance, had 80 CFM of flow, that there was 80 square inches of sizing for the pressure balancing duct or transfer grill. But that's a new measurement. We continue with the total duct leakage. We continue with duct leakage to outdoors. We continue with the ventilation flow rate. That has to be measured, and make sure it's no more than 10% above ASHRAE 62.2. Check the exhaust fan flow rate, also consistent with ASHRAE 62.2, and where there is combustion equipment in the house that uses indoor air for combustion, then you may need to do a net exhaust or net supply flow. And so it's only for a very limited number of homes that would have, for instance, a fireplace or wood stove that uses internal air for combustion. If the fireplaces or wood stoves are ducted with outdoor air for combustion, you don't need to do this. This should be a very limited number of homes that need this measurement as well. Okay, moving along to the next items for the HERS rater checklist. We had 3 requirements in the checklist. One, that building cavities cannot be used for supply or return ducts, that ducts shall not be installed in exterior walls, and that exhaust fans and duct boots shall be sealed. We clarified requirements for no duct bends over 90 degrees with language that is more enforceable in the field, and we clarified the same for no loop duct work, where a contractor would take a full oversized length of duct and use it for a much shorter run with looping. We clarified what's the requirements there. Also, for the ventilation inlets, we clarified in climate zones 1 through 3, you need 2-foot clearance above grade, and in zones 4 and higher, you need 4-foot clearance above grade. And lastly, we relocated the requirement for Energy Star exhaust fans with ventilations and clarified the fan rating requirements onto the rated checklist as well. So I think we're good there. Moving to the next set of updates for the mandatory requirement changes. We eliminated low flow shower heads and efficient hot water distribution. We eliminated Energy Star qualified lighting, appliances, and fans, although they still are in the reference design, which means if you're doing Energy Star on a prescriptive path using the reference design, you would need to do Energy Star qualified lighting, appliances, and fans. But if you're doing performance, you could trade off against those, and they're not on the mandatory checklist. We eliminated R8 duct installation mandatory. Now it's only required for ducts inside unconditioned attics. R6 is acceptable for all other supply return ducts. And efficient exhaust fans are only required for full baths. On the reference design, we went through a number of changes. I'll kind of cover those now. The gas furnace AFUE has been dropped from 92% to 90% to align with the Energy Star threshold. And there are increases in the heat pump efficiency in cold climates to address the challenges there, keeping the consumption levels down during very cold times of year. So in climate zone 4, the heat pump requirements went up to basic Energy Star levels, 8.5 HSPF, 14.5 CF12 EER with electric backup, or you can use, instead of electric backup, an Energy Star qualified heating system as a dual fuel system. So that's climate zone 4. I'm going to ask you for forgiveness in some typos in this particular item as I go through them. Climate zone 5, you have to go above Energy Star to 9.25 or greater HSPF. CR 14.5, 12 EER with electric backup, or instead of electric backup, you can again use an Energy Star qualified fossil fuel system so that you have a dual fuel backup system. In climate zone 6 or 8, this is a typo. Climate zone 6, this is a typo. This is only for climate zone 6. It should be a 9.5 HSPF. And again, here you have to use an Energy Star qualified dual fuel backup system. So we don't have any electric resistance heating backup in climate zone 6, and in climate zones 7 and 8, you can't use anything but a ground source heat pump. So that's only for climate zone 6 that you can use a conventional heat pump. Climate zone 7 and higher, only a ground source heat pump may be used. And of course, a ground source heat pump can be used in any climate. Again, I apologize for the confusion with the typos in the slide. The information posted on Friday should have all this more clearly laid out and more accurate. Also note that on the reference design, we dropped the air infiltration about 1 ACH50 for all climate zones. So if you required 5 ACH50, it dropped to 4, 6 to 5, and so forth. And again, thinking through this and listening to some comments, we agreed it was time for the air leakage performance to be ratcheted up with this 3rd generation specification. And also an error in the last first release was we had the window area at 18%, but it should be 15% to align with IECC 2009. Reference design modifications continued. Again, we talked about this before. We go to R8 duct insulation for ducts and unconditioned attics, R6 at all other supply and return ducts. And one other note is that 80% efficient bulbs are specified or fixtures are specified for the reference design, but on prescriptive compliance you could use the advanced lighting package just to help promote that sub-label for Energy Star. And the advanced lighting package is 60% of fixtures, 100% of fans. So you have that option as well. Now, those are the key technical changes and the responses and what you will see in the new information. What I want to do right now is go through the implementation schedule that we currently are planning. And some details are cut out just to kind of just go at the most critical items. But here we go. For starting January 1st next year to January 1st of 2011, that will be a critical time for the EPA team and the contractor team working with us. We have an amazing amount of work to do next year. We have to develop 3 field guides, one for each of the checklists: thermal enclosure, HVAC quality systems, and water management. So we have 3 field guides to develop. We are going to be developing an extensive training curriculum around those guides, train the trainer classes to enlist an army of folks who can help us provide training across the country. And then hopefully we will leverage a lot of support from industry to do, and our utility sponsors to do, regional training classes all across the country. At the same time, we'll be developing web-based training 24/7. We're talking with some partners about video-based training 24/7 as well. Some coordination with ResNet has to start to try and see if we can team up with them to get our checklists into their rating standards so that ResNet oversight will extend to those checklists, and then work with the sponsor programs, states, and utilities to augment their support where needed and not already there with QA/QC programs. And we'll be working with the industry this year at our March sponsor meeting to develop guidelines and minimum requirements for those QA/QC programs. So that's a very important piece of what we're doing, but you can see that's a lot to do in 1 year. Then starting on January 1st, 2011, for the next year, the new specifications are formally released. At that time, the performance prescriptive path options take hold and are immediately required for all homes permitted after January 1st or after. So starting January 1st, 2011, you have to do the new simulated performance method or use a new reference design as your prescriptive path. But the mandatory checklists will not be enforced. They'll be completed on every project, but that 1 year from January 1st of 2011 to 2012 is intended to give builders and raters enough time to gear up and address all the extensive new requirements in those checklists. Now, there's one exemption, or there's one exception to that. The air barrier and air sealing checklist on the thermal enclosure checklist will be enforced. And those are very similar to the thermal bypass checklist today with the addition of some air sealing requirements. And there's no way we want to go back and not continue the amazing value that's provided through the thermal bypass checklist. So all the other checklist requirements on the 3 checklists are given a year during which you complete the checklist on every job, but they're only enforced starting January 1st, 2012. Now, for those that can get on board with the checklist and comply with all the requirements during the year from January 1st, 2011, there will be new version 3 stickers available, and that will denote the fact that they're meeting the latest new requirements. If you do not meet all the new requirements, you will continue using the old sticker. We'll also be working with the sponsors starting January 1st, 2011 to implement the QA/QC activities that we develop with them and that they develop on their own based on the new requirements that utilities will be expected to have a QA/QC component. And lastly, we're going to require raters and builders to do an online course familiarizing themselves with all facets of the new specifications before they can use the new label. So you'll have to go online, take a course, and pass a test to continue on with version 3. This is to make sure every builder and every rater at least knows and gets familiar with the new requirements. It will not be a difficult test. It will not be a difficult course. But in a lot of our travels, our team has found it's interesting how many times you experience situations where builders or raters haven't really understood or got familiar with all the requirements of the program. So there's too much new rigorous requirements not to make sure we know every partner has gone through a minimum background education about the new program. And then in 2012, starting January 1st, all requirements for the checklist, all requirements for performance prescriptive combined are in play and have to be followed. We expect to have all the sponsored QA/QC programs in gear. Hopefully we have that time. We will see some success getting ResNet to adopt the new checklists. We're getting close to that. We are understanding that ResNet's also augmenting their QA/QC program, and EPA will also provide a QA/QC program, particularly to fill in gaps where there are no sponsor programs around the country. So a lot to do. And lastly, some new policies I want to bring out. We will not allow raters to alter the configuration of the Energy Star reference design unless directed to do so by EPA. So what EPA will do is provide customized reference designs for all states with rigorous codes. So this will be our responsibility to get those out there. So we don't expect raters to do this on their own. They have to get the direction from EPA, and we'll provide those customized reference designs for those states. And we do have a number of states we have to get very active working with: Oregon, California, Florida, and some others, because the codes are ramping up in those states or already increased right now. And lastly, raters may still offer or equal alternatives under their determination to EPA specifications, but based on concerns raised about fairness and EPA oversight, all occasions where raters want to use an or equal option at their discretion, they have to first submit it to EPA. So that will be a new policy requirement. So I covered a lot of information. Again, here's the website. Friday, we understand by the end of the day, all this information will be posted. It's going to be really, really important for all of you who are working with the program to give this a good, clear look. It's a little bit of a compressed time. December 16th is the deadline to submit comments to EPA. We expect first quarter of 2011, hopefully in January, but maybe because of comments that come in, we want to build a buffer in case we need extra time. We will have the new 2011 spec on the street, and we have our work cut out for us. 2011, 2012, lots of very important work to do. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate the support from all of you. We think Energy Star for Homes has finally grown up to the program it should be. We had to get there incrementally. We'd love to have been a complete building science program from the beginning, but you have to kind of address real world constraints, and now's the time to bring this excellence to the market, bring the high performance homes and systems to the market. And we think the builders that work with this program are going to have an incredible competitive advantage working together to get a message out to the home buying public about how good these homes will be. So that's my introduction. I have about maybe at most 10 minutes for questions. So Jackie, why don't you